In 2014, a small town in Vermont was told that a man named Ronald Red had just died. He'd worked as a gas station attendant and a janitor at a JCPenney. He wore the same worn coat for years and drove an old Toyota. When the lawyers opened his will, the town found out he'd quietly left behind $8 million. Nobody who knew him saw it coming. Not one person. That's not the twist, though. The twist is this: looking poor didn't happen to Ronald Red by accident. It's the actual mechanism that built the $8 million. And once you see how it works, you'll never look at a driveway, a closet, or your own bank app the same way again. I'm going to show you the formula that tells you which side of this you're on. I'm going to show you the tax you're paying right now without realizing it. And near the end, I'll show you the sneaky new version of this trap that even frugal people are falling for. Stick around, because the ending changes what you do with your next paycheck. Let's start with the research, because the numbers here are stranger than the story. Decades ago, a researcher named Thomas Stanley set out to study actual American millionaires. Not people who looked rich, people who were rich. He found something almost nobody expects. The typical millionaire spends around 1% of their net worth on the car in their driveway. The typical American spends closer to 30% of theirs. Same parking space, 30 times the bite. Here's where it gets funny. When Stanley first published his findings, the single most common car among American millionaires was a Ford. Decades later, when the study got redone on a fresh group of millionaires, the top brand had quietly become Toyota. The badge of American wealth, it turns out, is the absence of a badge. Now, before you assume this means millionaires only buy beat-up used cars, they don't. Most of them buy new. They just buy once, keep it a decade, and refuse to let a car become a personality trait instead of a percentage of their assets. Quality, not flash. That distinction matters because it's the whole game in miniature. Stanley also handed us a one-line formula for figuring out which side of this line you're personally standing on. Take your age. Multiply it by your pre-tax household income. Divide by 10. That's roughly what your net worth should be. Land at double that number, and you're what he called a prodigious accumulator of wealth. Land at half, and you're an underaccumulator, no matter how good your income looks on paper. Let's run it on two people. Mike is 41, a surgeon, pulling in $310,000 a year. He leases a Range Rover, lives in a 5-bedroom house he's stretched to afford, and last year quietly asked a colleague for a short-term loan to cover a tax bill. Multiply his age by his income, divide by 10. His target is around $1.27 million. His actual number? $240,000. 18% of target, and most of that is locked in a house he can't touch without buying another one. Now Carol. She's 55, a bookkeeper making $68,000 a year. She drives a Honda with 140,000 miles on it and has never once been asked to explain a car payment. Her formula target is $374,000. Her actual net worth? $1.1 million. Nearly 3 times target on a fifth of Mike's income. At the neighborhood barbecue, everybody assumes Mike is the rich one, including Mike. You probably think that's just personality. Some people are savers, some aren't. It isn't that simple, because the market is quietly rigging this against almost everyone, and the car lot is where you can watch it happen in real time. The average new car payment in America right now sits around $770 a month, on a loan just under $44,000, stretched across nearly 6 years. Almost 1 in 5 new loans now carries a payment north of $1,000 a month. 5 times more common than it was just 5 years ago. Here's the part that should surprise you. Most of those $1,000 a month vehicles aren't luxury cars. They're pickup trucks. Big, capable, 4-wheel drive machines that spend 95% of their life hauling a briefcase and a coffee cup. So the looking rich tax isn't mostly being paid in the sports car lane. It's being paid in the school pickup line by people who'd swear they're being sensible. And here's the twist hiding underneath all of it. Depreciation, the quietest wealth killer in personal finance. The average new car loses roughly 45% of its value in 5 years. Certain luxury sedans lose closer to 2/3 of their value in that same window. $60,000, $70,000 gone, whether the car moved an inch or sat in the garage the entire time. Break that down to a daily number and it's close to $40 a day. Every single day. You are feeding a parking meter that charges you to not go anywhere. Meanwhile, Carol's Honda lost half its value too. She just wasn't the one paying for it. Someone else absorbed that loss years before she bought it secondhand. That's not some special frugal gene. That's just letting somebody else feed the meter first. Now, why do we do this to ourselves? This is where it stops being about spreadsheets and starts being about psychology, and it's honestly the more interesting question. Back in 1899, an economist named Thorstein Veblen coined a phrase for it: conspicuous consumption. His argument was blunt. In a money-based society, status doesn't come from having resources, it comes from being seen wasting them. If the spending were purely useful, it wouldn't prove anything. It has to be a little wasteful to work as a signal. Same reason a peacock drags around a tail that makes it easier to get eaten. It's not logical. It's advertising. And that signal doesn't stay contained. Economist Robert Frank described how spending at the top drags everyone else's reference point upward. An expenditure cascade. When the top tier spends more, the tier below adjusts, and the tier below that adjusts too, until somebody 3 income brackets down feels genuinely embarrassed standing next to a perfectly reliable 10-year-old sedan. Nobody in that chain made an irrational choice. They responded reasonably to a frame that got shoved downward by people they've never even met. Here's the joke buried inside all of it, though. In a classic study, researchers had college students wear a mildly embarrassing t-shirt into a room full of peers, then asked them to guess how many people noticed. Students guessed around 50%. The real number was closer to 23. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. You dramatically overestimate how closely anyone is watching you. Now put that next to a $770 monthly payment, made for almost 6 years, to impress an audience that's paying roughly half the attention you assume, and mostly worrying about their own car payment instead. So you'd think once this gets exposed, the trend would just die out. Instead, culture found a sneakier version. Around a few years ago, loud logos went out of style and quiet luxury, stealth wealth, came in. And what happened next might be the purest thing capitalism has ever produced. A philosophy explicitly built around not signaling wealth instantly became its own product category with its own uniform. Unmarked cashmere sweaters running $1,000 to $3,000, a plain baseball cap for $450. The entire pitch is that it has no logo, so only the right people recognize it. 2 people in identical, unbranded gray sweaters can stand across a room silently clocking each other, each one certain the other one gets it. It's a secret handshake that costs $30,000 and only works on people who already have $30,000. The financing side got quieter too. A large share of buy now pay later users admit they've made a late payment in the past year. And most say they've used the service for something they genuinely couldn't otherwise afford. It doesn't sell you a $200 item. It sells you the appearance of someone who can casually absorb a $200 item without blinking. Add in the fact that nearly a quarter of new vehicles on the road today are leased rather than owned, and a lot of the wealth you're seeing in traffic isn't owned by anyone. It's a monthly subscription to an impression. And the cost of that isn't just financial anymore, it's psychological. Recent surveys on what's been called money dysmorphia found a large share of people, especially younger adults, feel constantly behind financially, even when their actual numbers say otherwise. Many of the people who felt behind had 5 figures saved. They weren't failing. They were just marinating in a feed engineered to make comfortable people feel poor. Okay, here's the reframe, and it's the part that actually matters. Ronald Read wasn't an outlier because he was lucky. He was an outlier because he refused to convert income into objects. A former SEC clerk named Schreiber did almost the exact same thing. Modest job, modest apartment, same worn coat for years, and quietly built a fortune worth over $20 million by the time she died, almost entirely by reinvesting and never upgrading her life to match her account balance. 2 completely different people, decades apart, running the exact same invisible strategy. Here's the number that actually moves the needle, and it isn't your income, it's your savings rate, because it does 2 jobs at once. It speeds up how fast you build wealth, and it shrinks the total amount you actually need, since your target is really a multiple of what you spend, not what you earn. Save 10% of what you take home, and you're looking at roughly 5 decades of working life. Push that to 20%, and the number drops to under 40 years. That's not a 10% improvement. That's over a decade of your life bought back, and it usually comes from one single decision. not converting your next raise into a payment. So here's the actual lesson. Looking poor isn't deprivation. Ronald Read wasn't miserable. Carol isn't miserable. It's just refusing to let other people's eyes decide what your money is for. The biggest mistake isn't buying a nice car or a nice sweater. It's letting a raise get spent before your bank account even notices it arrived. The action is simple. The next time your income goes up, let your savings rate absorb it first before your lifestyle finds out it happened. But there's a second version of this trap that's even sneakier than the car, the sweater, or the truck. One that doesn't show up in a driveway at all, and most financially disciplined people fall straight into it without noticing. That one's coming in the next video.